Aloha, Inspired Moneymaker. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back to Inspired Money. I'm your host, Andy Wong, aka Advisor Andy. Today we're diving into a topic that touches every one of us eventually, some earlier than others, retirement. But this is not in the old school end of road way. For many people, retirement today is not about stopping, it's about shifting. It's about slowing down just enough to rediscover what matters, redesign how you spend your time, and rethink the role that money plays in your joy, your health, and your purpose. If you've ever wondered what life looks like after the hustle, how to spend without guilt, how to stay mentally sharp, emotionally grounded, and socially connected, or how to build a life that feels intentionally rich, this conversation is for you. We're exploring the kind of retirement that's not just financially secure, but deeply meaningful. And to help us do that, we have an extraordinary panel, voices who have shaped the worlds of financial independence, mindful living, and purposeful aging. You're in for a treat, so stay with us. Before we jump in, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor. This episode of Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management, my independent family-run investment firm that helps people to build wealth with clarity and confidence for more than 30 years now. If you're thinking about retirement or already in it, you know it's about more than just hitting a number. It's about creating a life that feels intentional, secure, and aligned with your values. My team helps you to design a financial plan that supports the life that you want to live, not the life you think you're supposed to live. From retirement income strategies to tax-efficient investing to thoughtful estate planning, my team can bring the expertise and personal touch to guide you every step of the way. So whether you're planning your next chapter, downsizing, or redefining your purpose, Runnymede can help you build a portfolio and a plan that supports a mindful, meaningful future. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan to get a free 3-minute financial plan. You'll see your projected retirement age and income, plus strategies to reduce debt, lower taxes, grow your investments, and protect your future. No sales pitch there, no obligation. Just take 3 minutes at inspiredmoney.fm/getplan to kick off a little bit of time looking at your finances and your retirement. I would love to be of help if I can. Now let's bring in our guests. Today, we're joined by the legendary Vicki Robin, social innovator, best-selling author, and one of the most influential voices in personal finance. Vicki co-authored Your Money or Your Life, the groundbreaking classic that reshaped how millions think about money, freedom, and purpose. She's also the author of Blessing the Hands That Feed Us, and she's host of the podcast, What Could Possibly Go Right?, where she explores bold solutions for a thriving future. Vicki, we're thrilled to have you back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be here with you and the other guests.
Next, we have Jordan Doc G. Grumet, a hospice physician, author, and host of the popular Earn and Invest podcast. Jordan brings a rare combination of medical insight and financial wisdom, helping people build wealth while focusing on what truly matters. His work at the intersection of money, mortality, and meaning challenges us to live intentionally and without regret. Doc G, so good to have you back, as always.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this great conversation.
And rounding out our panel today, we have Dr. Ellen Langer, the pioneering Harvard psychologist, widely known as the mother of mindfulness. For over 4 decades, her groundbreaking research has transformed our understanding of how mindful awareness without meditation can reshape health, aging, performance, and possibility. She's the author of at least 13 books, including the bestsellers Mindfulness and The Mindful Body, and has earned honors ranging from the Guggenheim Fellowship to the Liberty Science Genius Award. Dr. Langer, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm very excited about this conversation about retirement that's going to venture beyond spreadsheets. So we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get started and jump straight into segment 1.
Retirement doesn't have to be an abrupt stop. The Great Deceleration reframes it as a gradual downshift, a transition from career, which is about what you do, to calling, which is about who you are. This process unfolds in 3 phases. First, the wind down, reducing workload, delegating responsibilities, and creating mental space. Next comes the sabbatical, a period of intentional rest where you resist the urge to overschedule and instead experiment with new interests in low-stakes ways. Finally, re-engagement, aligning your time with pursuits that bring meaning, whether mentoring, volunteering, or creative work. This phased approach helps avoid identity foreclosure, the trap of being defined solely by a job. By treating retirement as a liminal space to be navigated, you move beyond loss of role into purposeful renewal, creating a life structured around fulfillment rather than obligation.
Vicki, how can retirees challenge outdated assumptions about what slowing down should look like?
Thanks for that question. I think behind that question is a question of status. And status is very important in for all primates, including us. Status is, the access to, to food and reputation, et cetera. So when slowing down feels like mental torpor, when it feels like being over the hill, being sent out to pasture, there's so many images of low status living. And it's very hard to sacrifice that because we live in a status driven world where if you want to be able to participate enough to be able to match speed and direction with the world that you're in and make good decisions until the day you die, it's important to be able to sort of pony up that mental acuity. So it's called ageism. Ageism is the ism that isn't. It's the ism that nobody talks about because we all believe it. Nobody wants gray hair. Nobody wants the chin. Because all of that is low status. All of that is the presumption that you've lost your mind, that you're slowing, that you're useless. And we're very afraid of that. So there's a lot to your simple question.
Jordan, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because you can bring perspectives as an early retiree, but I'm also curious what emotional consequences perhaps you've seen when people never take a sabbatical season in life.
So it's interesting. I quibble with the definition of retirement because in a lot of ways, I actually think retirement starts when you can afford to start decumulating. So that means when you have enough money in the bank, you have enough income, you've kind of started retirement. Now, you can decide to leave your job or not leave your job, but then it becomes the personal choice. So I don't like this idea of slowing down into retirement. What I like about retirement is this idea that you now have a lot more choice. And this idea that all of a sudden I'm going to slow down, stop, and not do work anymore doesn't really work for most of us because we're kind of doing work our whole life, right? When you're being employed, you're doing it so that someone will pay you. I love to give the example of the dishwasher. If you work as a dishwasher, you wash dishes in a restaurant and your boss pays you. But after you retire, what goes home? Well, you eat and then you wash your own dishes. You're still doing the same work, except now you're doing it for you instead of a paycheck. So I like the idea of sabbaticals. There are times when we get exhausted, when we're tired, when we need a break. But I would hazard against thinking about retirement as a time of slowing down per se. It's actually just a time of unlimited choice, where instead of working for other people, you get to work for yourself, which means you get to start making decisions about what work fills you up, what excites you, and most importantly, what connects you to other people, because that's going to make that season of your life more full.
I love the unlimited choices. Ellen, can you talk about mindful attention and how maybe that can help retirees reinterpret uncertainty, not as loss, but as a wide open field of possibilities?
Yeah, I'm happy to. But first, let me comment on Jordan's statement about all these choices. The research seems to suggest that people become overwhelmed with too many choices. And so what happens is people are busy at work, and then many decide to retire thinking then they'll want to do all the things that they've put off, and they don't even know where to begin. And so most people, and the people I'm speaking of are people of means, people who are educated, are basically lost. And, this may sound silly, but the point is that how do you get engaged in something? Now, people think, you have to take on something big. Now that you're not working, you have to become a famous artist, a writer, an Olympic athlete, which is all kind of ridiculous. And let me tell you about a study that we did that won't seem relevant at first. But so we take people who don't like music, who don't like art, women who don't like football, and we divide them into 4 groups. The first group, they just do the activity. The next group, they're asked to notice 1 new thing in what they're doing. The next group noticed 3 new things. And the last group noticed 6 new things. And it turns out to end up enjoying what you're doing, all you need to do is notice new things about it. So I think that for retirement, for many people, not all, but for many people, the problem in retirement is they don't know how to re-engage. In the first place, doing their jobs, they didn't have a whole lot of choice, and they're told what to do until you make it all the way up the ladder and what have you. And by recognizing that mindfulness is the very simple process of active noticing, and it can be 3 new things about football. You can notice the rear ends of the football player. It doesn't matter. Just the simple noticing gets you engaged. When you're engaged, the neurons are firing. And 45 years of our research has shown that that's literally and figuratively enlivening. Now, it's also the case that many people think they know what they want to do when they retire, when they're older. And I think that's largely based on what was meaningful to them many years earlier. And so now that they have the opportunity, they don't want to do it anymore, and then they become a little lost. When you see how easy it is to actually engage, that's one way for people to find themselves. The other, I think, is as you get older, and I think as both Jordan and Vicki suggested, and you start deacquisitioning, you see you don't need all of those things. What still remains valuable, more valuable than things, are experiences. And so those who've planned, well, now I'm going to travel a little, just to get themselves into a new way of life, is wonderful. I haven't retired yet. I also haven't slowed down. I feel like I'm speeding up in some ways, but it's joyful. So it's very nice when you get older, if you can be in a lucky position, to realize you don't have to do all of those things. And even if you're doing, as Jordan said, the dishes, you don't have to do the dishes at work anymore because you're not there. You can do the dishes at home in a different manner. That all you need to do to engage anything is to be there. The essence of this mindfulness, I might make clear, this has nothing to do with meditation. And it's it's very simple, and it stems from a very simple understanding, which is that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception. Everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different angles and so on. And so knowing that everything is always changing, you can't know. And if people recognize that no one knows, then not knowing would be glorious, right? And so when you don't know, then you find out. And now with this freedom to move around the world, around your house, without the anxiety of work, and simply not take everything for granted. All you need to do, for instance, is walk outside, which you've done, let's say, over the last 20 years every day, and notice new things, which you will. And just, gee, how come I never saw that before? And notice new things about your spouse if you're living with somebody, and so on. So, and as you're noticing, first of all, you become aware that, gee, I don't know very much of anything. So if you can become mindful, in other words, top down, just accept that you don't know. everything is new. Or bottom up, this active noticing, which you do often enough, leads you to the same place. And the advantage of this mindfulness is not only that it's energy begetting, adds life to your years, it's the essence of what you're doing when you're feeling alive. And all of the negative emotions that we suffered when we were at work, feeling less good about yourself, feeling stress, all of these things are mindless. And even if you stay at work, they now, as you become more mindful, diminish.
Vicki, does Ellen speeding up rather than slowing down, does that resonate? Do you consider yourself retired today?
Oh, absolutely not. I've been retired since I was in my 20s. In other words,
Right.
I have lived within my means. And I've lived within my means because freedom means more to me than money. And the freedom isn't just freedom to get away from it to it. That sort of away, separation aspect of freedom, but the freedom to learn about the world and mostly for me, it's intersecting with the world around me in a way that's meaningful to myself and others. And I want to drop something in here about retirement, is that a lot of our commentary is coming from separation. It's coming from, what do I want to do? What I want to notice? What I want to work on? I. And we live in a context. We live in a context of family. We live in a context of community. We live in a context of this world, this very complex world. And so finding meaning absent context is, in a way, it's just a continuous pampering of the ego. It's a continuous, like how you have to keep a toddler, interested in something. And one of the biggest needs for people, and one of the aspects of longevity, is belonging. And you don't get belonging through consuming things. You can, through noticing. I was very happy to hear you say that, Ellen, because I have a practice that I call noticing. And I just made it up. I never heard anybody say it. And I would go out with my phone, not listening to anything, but with my phone's camera. And I will notice things. And I even name it, noticing this, noticing that, noticing. And the world comes alive. And so I'm in relationship through noticing. I'm in relationship with the natural world, the farmland that's right beside my house. So I just want to bring that in, that, and so often, this is sort of one of my hobby horses. I don't have an answer. It's not a hobby horse answer. It's a hobby horse question. Is that everybody wants community. Everybody says, okay, at the end of the day, we need community. But the activity of creating community is so often approached from a consumer perspective. It's, I want community. It's not the very hard work of shutting up, It's not the very hard work of doing the micro actions that let people know, I care about you, and do you need something? And can I help out? And I heard you like XYZ. Can I give you my surplus book? Putting up a little free library. It's like micro actions. They're not big deal things. And it's not for the amplification of ego. It's not to consume belonging. It's to allow belonging to grow around you like moss on a walkway. It's that moss that connects. So it's, I think there's the American, even the idea of retirement says you're going to separate from perhaps a community that was very meaningful to you. So the whole thing is bollocks. I'll just put it.
Before we go to the next segment, I just want to ask Jordan, because Jordan, your community of early retirees and even your own personal experience, talk a little bit about this transition from career to calling, because it can be a challenging one.
Well, I've done a lot of thinking about happiness for me and the people around me. And I originally thought it was purpose that brings happiness, right? And so I did all sorts of research and tried to figure out, well, how does purpose bring happiness? And I found, studies that showed that having a sense of purpose is associated with health, happiness, longevity. But I also knew a lot of people who are really struggling with purpose. Exactly what Dr. Langer was talking about, like they're leaving work and it was the only version of purpose they knew. And they think they have to have this big, audacious version of purpose. They have to do something big, and it actually frustrates them and exhausts them. And so I started thinking about what I call little p purpose, process-oriented purpose, much more simple, things that light you up, things that allow you to be, I think, mindful, like Dr. Langer was talking about, maybe allow you to get into a flow state. And that could be just taking a walk, or that could be writing, or that could be reading, a crime novel, whatever kind of excites you and lights you up. But it still didn't answer the question for me. If purpose is associated with health, happiness, and longevity, the other big study that talks about happiness is the Harvard study of adult development, which tends to talk about interpersonal connections, just what we're talking about. Communities, connections are probably what's most associated with happiness. And so I was left trying to figure out, well, how does this version of purpose I'm talking about, what I call little p purpose, connect to that? And I think when we pursue things that light us up, a little bit selfish, right? Things that we enjoy that light us up, we tend to show up as very intentional selves. It tends to light us up. It makes us very bright, and like a moth to a flame, other people interested in the similar types of things connect with us. They end up collaborating with us. And before you know it, we're actually creating communities. So Andy, you asked me about, for instance, the personal finance community. Well, as I started moving away from work as a doctor, something that didn't light me up, and I started doing something a little bit more selfish, which was writing and communicating and podcasting, things that did light me up, because I came as a very intentional version of myself, someone who was much more mindful, maybe even was in a little bit more of a flow state because I was excited about doing it. It tended to connect me to other people, and those other people became part of my community. And as I look at my life as a 52-year-old versus my life as a busy 45-year-old doctor, I find myself much more happy, much more connected, much more mindful. And so, technically, am I retired? Well, I retired mostly from being a physician. I certainly don't do these things to make money anymore. But I wouldn't call it retirement in the sense that it feels very active. And like Dr. Langer, I feel busier than ever. But I just feel a lot more lit up by it. And I feel a lot more concern about money, and much more concerned about, well, who is this connecting me to? How are we collaborating? How are we building together? How are we becoming part of a community? But that seems to be the most gratifying. And in a sense, speaking, I think, to some of Vicki's concerns, this is, I think, in a way in which I go from a little bit more of that selfish, me-centered world to actually affecting the rest of the world, hopefully in positive ways. So I think it's actually connected me with the outer world, even though I started with a very internal belief of what would bring me joy, this kind of version of little p purpose, something that just felt good to me and exciting.
Thank you. Great advice. Sometimes it's just taking a walk, and I am a big fan of your work behind the mic. So we are all beneficiaries of you doing something that lights you up. Let's move on and go on to segment 2.
After decades of saving, the hardest shift in retirement is not financial, but psychological. Moving from scarcity to serenity. Many retirees, even with substantial assets, struggle to spend, fearing they will run out. The solution is to reframe spending as purposeful, not reckless. A practical approach is the 3-bucket system. The security bucket covers essentials through guaranteed income sources, silencing fears about survival. The lifestyle bucket funds your everyday comforts with a disciplined withdrawal strategy. The dreams bucket is dedicated to joy, travel, family, or passions, giving you explicit permission to spend. Pair this with values-based spending, aligning expenses with what matters most: health, family, learning, or community. By creating structure and clarity, you grant yourself freedom from guilt. Retirement then becomes less about protecting every dollar and more about using money to create a life of fulfillment.
Jordan, in your experience, what regrets surface when people cling too tightly to financial scarcity thinking?
Well, financial scarcity can cause all sorts of problems, right? Because ultimately, I deal with death and dying a lot as a hospice physician, and rarely do people tell me on their deathbeds that they regret that they spent their money the right way or the wrong way. They don't really talk about money at all. They wish they were a better version of themselves, doing the things that were important to them and connecting with the people who are important to them. So there is a money aspect in the sense that if there are things that are important to you, ways you want to connect with the world, you will regret if you don't use your money to do that. But I think there's a continuum of spending to make us happy. And right. So we all know this thing called the hedonic treadmill, right? If you spend on things, it tends to briefly make you happy. And usually we hedonically adapt and end up basically where we started. We know also this idea that if you spend on experiences, I think you move in the right direction, right? Because experiences, you have memory dividends, and people tend to, like studies show that people tend to get more out of that. I think what's really interesting about spending in retirement is, for me at least, the end of the continuum is spending to become a better version of yourself, right? So doing the things that are deeply important to you. If you're an adventurer and love to travel the world, yes, spending is important to go and take that trip to Rome and take that trip to Paris, etc. But what's also magical about that is, if that's really who you are, this adventurous person who likes exploring new people and new cultures, you can do that in your own backyard, in your own city. You can do that and not even spend that much money. And so what I think, in my version at least, you start realizing on this continuum that spending's not nearly as important as we think it is. I mean, it's really important to, be able to put food on the table and to have shelter, et cetera. But when you get to retirement, I think the highest version of spending is becoming the best version of you, connecting to people, having some generosity, all those kind of good things we can do with money. But a lot of times those don't even actually cost that much. And so I think our regrets are that we didn't become a better version of ourselves, and money's only loosely tied to that.
Ellen, what does your research suggest about emotional health benefits of allowing oneself to spend joyfully?
Sure. Before we talk about spending, can I just talk about regret? Right.
Sure.
So that regret is mindless. If you know why you're doing what you're doing, then you won't regret not doing something else. And the problem is, especially before we retire, when people are moving through this world in a robotic way. All right. So, should you buy this item or that item? If the reason you want to buy it is to show somebody you can afford it, well, hopefully by the time you get to a retirement age, that has all passed. If you want to buy it because you think there's some experience it will provide for you that you can't have any other way, I think that's just simply wrong. I think that, look, the other day I was, I had this experience that was absolutely ridiculous. All I know is my spouse and I were laughing, full out for 10, 15 minutes, uncontrollably. And there was nothing that happened, right? And it didn't cost anything. And so if you look at the times you've enjoyed, that the enjoyment comes from this act of noticing, this participation in whatever you're doing. And a large part of our enjoying the world, enjoying other people, in the way that Vicki said, to facilitate our relationships, is essentially for us to know one very simple thing. Andy, I have many, many very big findings about health, longevity, but this one idea that I came up with after almost 50 years of thinking about these things, more important to me than any other, which is that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else he or she wouldn't do it. And what that means is every time you're coming down on yourself or somebody else, like, Vicki, I can't stand you. You're so damn inconsistent. That's mindless. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, today I'm going to be inconsistent, conforming, sloppy. So what are they intending? And when you do that and you say, what is the positive version of inconsistent? You say, oh, she's being flexible. You can't stand me, Vicki, because I am so gullible, which I am. Help me not be gullible, Jordan. You must have some experience with this. And we're going to try, but we're going to keep failing. Because going forward, my intention is not to be gullible. My intention is to be trusting. So it turns out for each and every negative description of our behavior or anybody else's behavior, there's an equally strong but oppositely balanced alternative. For every negative way of looking at it, there's a positively balanced alternative. As you get older, you come to realize a lot of this. And, so this is not the same thing as forgiving somebody their mishaps, their character flaws. It's understanding that from another perspective, that flaw is actually an asset. So when you do this, your relationship improve, and both Vicki and Jordan have made clear, relationships are the most important part of life, but we don't get a chance to experience that until we're older. So spending, what might I spend on? I don't know. I like giving money to my stepson, just to help with something he probably doesn't need help with. I like, taking people to lunch or to dinner, small money, but it makes me feel good. I'm at the age where I'm trying to get rid of things. And even that's kind of fun, finding people who might want them. Money, I don't think that money is the problem. The real problem, that if I wanted right now to take a trip around the world and I couldn't afford it, it would seem that money was the problem. However, why do I want to take that trip around the world? It's because I feel unfulfilled. I'm not happy. I'm assuming if I leave my current state, go someplace else, that will make me happier. And as I think it was you, Andy, somebody pointed out, that right outside your door, you go visit Vicki in her garden, and as long as it's new for you, it's going to be fun.
Vicki, what are your thoughts?
Oh man.
On all these people.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, please do come to my garden. I'm on Whidbey Island. It's going to be quite a trip. You're going to have to spend money on airfare. But what I'm thinking about for myself is that those three buckets, that my basics, I have like a income stream for the basics. It's very conservatively invested, so that's taken care of. But my surplus, again, I'm going to go to the social issues. I think that's probably my my job in this call is I could give a lot more money away if I knew exactly when I was going to die and that I would be healthy until then. And that the systems in our society would rise to meet me as my capacity diminished. But that's not true. We're on a sort of like, one of those electrified grids, where there's no escape. And so I think people are petrified about how much will they need when the time comes. And you can't control that in this society in this way. My ex-husband now lives in France, and he's a French citizen. He's married to a French woman, and he has wraparound care all the time. And he's got a very, difficult diagnosis, and he's just sailing through it. And so that's the difference between a society that decides that you are an asset to the society and that, the society owes you something for all you've given to it. If only your sunshine smiles, it's not transactional. It's community. It's not even community. So I think this is a sort of one of those hidden things in the whole conversation about, do I have enough? Can I stop earning money? Can I invest in that round the world trip and nothing else will satisfy it? I can't go out and look at the farmland and have the same experience. No, I want to go to Shanghai. So yeah, I just think that a lot of these discussions about money and money and meaning need to include the context in which we're living. And
I think without doubt, that that's the biggest fear. My only point about that is the worrying about it isn't going to solve any problem. And so I think that's sort of the essence of the three buckets. So your bucket for this point has to be much larger, just in case. But I think people need to understand that stress doesn't come from events. Stress comes from our views of events. And if you sit and imagine the worst, and nobody has any idea, the price of assisted living could be 4 times, and it's already very expensive, what it is right now. And then, to the point where very few people can afford it. And so I don't see how that worrying translates into doing anything effective. The sad thing, I think, would be, that you're spending all your time worrying about not you, spending all our time worrying about the what if we can't afford the future. So we give up the present, and then we get hit by a car or have that fatal heart attack or whatever it is. So, and as Andy will make clear, we're talking about some balance, but yeah. Sure.
Yeah, check your fears at the door. Let's go to segment 3.
A bucket list offers peak experiences, but it is finite. A sustainable retirement requires a broader framework, a portfolio of passions. Think of it like a time portfolio, intentionally diversified across key areas of life. Growth and learning keep your mind engaged. Health and wellness provide the energy for everything else. Creativity and play nourish your spirit through joy and self-expression. Connection and contribution deepen relationships and give purpose beyond yourself. Rest and reflection ensure balance and recovery. By consciously allocating time across these areas, you replace the what now of a completed bucket list with a resilient system for daily fulfillment. This approach shifts retirement from a project with an end date into an ongoing design, one where your days are not just filled but structured for meaning, growth, and sustainable joy.
Ellen, how does novelty, central to your research, I believe, help people to discover new passions later in life?
Well, everything is novel. As I said before, since everything is always changing and looks different from different perspectives. When I try to persuade people that they don't know, I ask a very simple question. So let me ask you, Andy, how much is 1 + 1?
1 + 1 is 2.
Well, this is what people think, and so they even think me foolish for asking, but 1 + 1 isn't always 2. First of all, it's only 2 if you're using the base 10 number system. If you're using the base 2 number system, 1 + 1 is written as 10, but number systems aside, you add 1 pile of laundry to 1 pile of laundry, 1 + 1 is 1. You add 1 cloud to 1 cloud, 1 + 1 is 1. You add 1 wad of chewing gum to 1 wad of chewing gum, 1 + 1 is 1. And the point is, in the real world, 1 + 1 probably doesn't equal 2, as more often as it does. Now, the point here is when you don't know, and all of a sudden now you have a choice. Somebody says to you, I ask you again, Andy, how much is 1 + 1? You can say 1, 2, or 10. All right, you have choices. When we respond as if we know, we respond mindlessly, then we're no different from robots. We can't experience any emotions, and we don't have any choice. So novelty is not something unusual. Everything is novel. Today you're different from the way you were yesterday. And it's very good for relationships to notice this. And if you don't have a spouse, and notice it in, close friends, and you'll see, gee, they're not the same person they were yesterday. And the differences are subtle and they feel cared for. So novelty, uncertainty is the rule. And what we need to do is learn how to exploit the power of uncertainty rather than be scared by it. And the fear comes generally from people thinking they should know, but they can't know, although some people pretend they do know. Once you know nobody knows, then finding out is great fun. And I think, as Jordan said, you can go someplace, spend a ton of money to get someplace, or you can just go develop a garden like Vicki's and just notice small things. And as far as bucket list, because I was on this very, very panel many, many years ago in Australia. And after, not a panel, it was individual talks, and they brought us out together. And out of nowhere, the person said, what is your bucket list? The first person who gave a bucket list. I was the last one to be asked. And I'm thinking, I don't have a bucket list. And that if you're enjoying what you're doing while you're doing it, you can't do more than that. So if you're miserable, then maybe you think if you take a trip to Paris, you'll be happy. If you're already happy, once the glass is full, it's full. And to fill the glass is just to think well enough of yourself, which is so much easier. And Vicki and I can speak to this. I think that life changes when you get a little older for one reason, one of several, but the most important is everybody else is younger. Younger people are just not so stressful anymore. When I was a kid and I started driving and I stopped by a policeman and I was 18 years old, he was 25, and oh my God, I was scared. The next time I was stopped by a policeman, I was 42 and he was still 25. It just doesn't scare you anymore. So other things that we're afraid of when we're younger, public speaking, this is the number one stress. So I asked my students at Harvard, and I said, how many of you are afraid of public speaking? Stand up. The whole class stands up. And I ask them questions. They all speak up. You just spoke in front of 200 people. It doesn't matter. And then I asked them, would they be, stressed, scared if they were talking to, say, a 5 or a 10-year-old? And of course not. And so that's the world that you come to experience, and it's glorious.
Vicki, your work honors creativity, community, and simple joys. Curious how your portfolio of passions, how has that evolved over time?
This is such an interesting conversation. I just want to listen. But so, on the subject of bucket lists, I just never thought I had one. I don't have a bucket list like someplace I want to go to that I've never seen. But I have had experiences throughout my life where I feel that I've fulfilled a desire, a period of time. I wanted to create something. I created it. It's up and running. It's there. And so there comes a moment where the question that came to me at the end of cancer, what wants to live through this body that has not had a chance at the body to live? And so it is its desire and its aspiration. So right now, my bucket list is when I look at this and I realize now I'm 80, if there's anything that I was undone, I should start doing it. The most important thing right now for me is this sense of completing my past, of bringing all of it into consciousness and allowing my life to be my life and my past to be my past, allowing the weave to be the weave, because that is my wisdom. I can't reject any part of my life and think the narrower interpretation of self is my wisdom. So here I am, having done many different things, never being qualified for any of them. I want to fulfill a dream. I was completely wowed when I saw the search for intelligent life in the universe. And I wanted to be Lily Tomlin. And I have done theater. I've done a lot of public speaking. That's given me an opportunity to do improvisational theater in front of 500 people with the script. But so I'm putting together a solo show, and it's really challenging. And I really want to do it, and I'm really afraid of flopping. And
no.
Yeah, no, come on, Ellen, just let me be that.
No, Vicki, wait a second. Let's say it's an abysmal failure. So what? Go on. I'm sorry.
What? No, it's okay, so for me, and it may not be true for other people, the deliciousness of experiencing all human emotions is the fodder for my joy. It's that self-reflective consciousness. So if I stumble on fear, that's really interesting to me. I can dive down. Where is that coming from? Not too analytical, but I can also go yum, 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 fear. What is this like in the body? It feeds my writing. It makes my writing deep, resonant, because I am with human emotions. And when I was younger and representing Your Money, Your Life, I had a narrower band of permitted emotions, if you will, because I was promoting something I felt very strongly about, that I not only did it produce more happiness, but also that, lowering consumption in North America was a necessary part of reducing the pressure of human civilization on the living earth. But now that I'm just sort of in a delicious feast of every emotion in the world, then see, that's really fine with me. I understand what you're saying, and I really love it, because when you pop into self-reflective consciousness, you are in joy looking at fear. But so part of the excitement for me of putting together a solo show is the fear. It's like, wow, this is like beyond anything I've ever done. And it's the freshness. It makes it new. I've never done it before. It's the adventure. So that sort of thing, and like there's things, for the world that I've done. I have some projects that are sort of bucket listy. In other words, I've been working on them for years and never gotten them off the drawing board. And so I'm interested in doing that. So that's the sort of thing. I guess it's meaning, purpose, fulfillment, worth living, that sort of stuff.
We're all ready to see your show, Jordan.
I was just going to say, Andy, what I think we're hearing both from Vicki and Ellen, and let me see if I could tie this together correctly. I think Ellen's noticing and joy in the moment, and Vicki's joy and deliciousness in maybe even some of the fear and doing something new. I think both of them are coming very centrally from a place of enoughness. I believe both of them are expressing this idea that they feel enough at baseline, so these new things can be joyful and open and exciting and even fearful in an exciting way. I think when we talk about retirement, what's so hard for people is their version of enoughness often has been tied to this identity of a job. So in the vernacular I often use, I talk about the difference between meaning and purpose. A lot of people think they're the same thing, at least in the way I look at these two terms. Meaning is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. It is the cognitive version of our past. It's the way we've dealt with our struggles and our traumas and our problems in the past. It's the way we look at the present and future. And it's all about thought. And it's all about our past. Whereas purpose, in my opinion, is much more about the activities we do in the present and future. So meaning is all about a journey to enough. And people who have a good sense of meaning, who tell themselves more heroic stories, tend to feel enough so that the present and future is really joyful, right? So this idea of retiring isn't so scary if you kind of feel enough on the inside. If you have a good sense of meaning, it means you can joyfully jump into all of these things. You can be present in the moment. You can take the time to notice. And I think both Ellen and Vicki are expressing exactly that. That's why for me, like bucket list items, again, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't feel like I have to prove that I'm enough by having this big version of something that I do in retirement that says, aha, he's enough, he's good enough, he's accomplished enough, he has a good enough retirement. I think all that becomes superfluous if you already feel enough at baseline. And maybe that's where people are really struggling with retirement, is their job became their version of enough. It was the story they told themselves, was that they were important because they had this job, and all of a sudden they're abandoning or they're walking away from making money, or making money was their version of enough. And suddenly they don't feel enough. And then we get that really uncomfortable feeling like we have to go prove ourselves. And that turns into bucket lists, and that turns into all sorts of things that maybe keep us away from the importance of things like noticing.
Well, it's a healthy reminder to, if you have a bucket list, that your bucket list is for yourself, not for your neighbors, not for others, not to impress others. I don't know if our panelists have time constraints. We're going a little bit long on this one. Let's move on to segment 4.
You've spent years managing financial assets, but your most important portfolio is your health. A longevity portfolio focuses on maximizing health span, the years you live in good health, by investing across 3 essential areas. First, physical vitality. Prioritize daily movement, a plant-forward diet, and consistent, high-quality sleep. Second, Cognitive sharpness. Strengthen your brain's neuroplasticity by engaging in new, challenging activities like learning a language, playing an instrument, or taking on complex hobbies. Third, emotional and social well-being. Reduce stress through mindfulness and cultivate strong relationships, since community and connection are powerful predictors of long life. Research from the world's blue zones shows these habits in action: natural movement, plant-based eating, and meaningful community ties. By treating your health like a portfolio, you create balance, resilience, and the capacity to enjoy not just more years, but better years.
Jordan, how do emotional health and unresolved stress show up physically later in life based on what you see medically?
Yeah, I'm watching your intro video and I'm saying yes, 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 and yes. I mean, do all that. We know, and as a physician, people often used to ask me about longevity. I was a primary care physician for many, many years. And the truth of the matter is, health is a lot easier, I believe, than we make it out to be. It's not which vitamin you take. It's the easy stuff, right? It's the getting the exercise, the wearing your seatbelt, getting reasonable cancer screening, living, loving, taking care of yourself, getting reasonable sleep, eating things you can identify. And so, it makes sense that you take care of your emotions, you take care of your body, and these things are going to help you in the long term. You're going to stay more mentally astute. You're going to be much more physically able. And you're going to be more able to connect to other people. And so, I think it's all connected. You can't just look at health as its own separate thing, or your economics as its own separate thing, or your emotional well-being as its own separate thing. I think they're all intimately tied together. And I think we do a horrendous job of making it much more complicated and difficult than it probably needs to be.
Ellen, what can your research teach us about how mindset influences physiological outcomes?
Sure. A lot of my work now, and in the new book, The Mindful Body, I present study after study, testing the idea that rather than have a mind and a body, and if you think of having a mind and a body, then you have to talk about how do you get from a fuzzy thing called a thought to something material called the body. So I say these are just words. Let's put the mind and body back together. And if we do that, wherever we put the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. And so I have a host of studies. Let me just very quickly, the counterclockwise study, which was the first one. We retrofitted a retreat to 20 years earlier. We had elderly men live there as if they were their younger selves. So they would be talking about past events as if they were just unfolding. In just a week, their vision improved, their hearing improved, their memory, their strength, and they looked noticeably younger. And I have study after study suggesting that this is, in fact, a useful way of understanding the person. And the point of it is that your happiness is not inconsequential to your health. And, I think, and I think Jordan sort of hinted at this. And he said, all right, and you want to eat well, eat well. But my own view is top down. The most important thing is how mindful you are. And so we had, in 45 years ago, we did a few studies. We make people more mindful, which again is just actively notice things, and we find they live longer. But this active noticing is literally enlivening, and figuratively, it's the way you are when you're feeling good, and it's so easy, And I think when you talk about stress, to my mind, stress is in fact the biggest killer. And I think everybody knows now, Jordan will tell you how many doctors agree that stress is bad for you. I'm saying the worst. So if we had people diagnosed with, let's say, cancer, nobody's going to be happy about it. So we give them, let's say, 3 weeks to adjust, and then we test their strength level, their stress level every 3-4 weeks. I think that we find that stress will predict the course of a disease better than diet, genetic makeup, and even treatment. And stress is psychological. So when you recognize that you don't have to feel this way, And if you ask yourself, how else can I understand this situation? So you see, a very simple takeaway for your listeners might be, next time you're stressed, just ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? And it's rarely a tragedy. It's like, I banged the car, I burnt the roast, I missed the meeting, I pulled out the wrong plant in Vicky's garden, whatever it is. And then and you can go forward. So what was the question? I gave you an answer. I don't know if it answered the question, but it was a good answer, so it doesn't matter, right?
Love the perspective. Vicki, what are your tips for our audience? Things that they can actually do or make changes in their lives to really improve long-term vitality?
Well, I would say I'm fascinated nonstop with opportunities, for noticing in my life. I think that's what Ellen's saying is really pertinent. It's your curiosity that keeps you connected with life as it unfolds, it unfurls moment by moment. Presence. When talking about presence, it's sort of used in a spiritual term. People, you have to meditate to be present, but like curiosity, fascination is also presence. I would also say that we've defined exercise as going to the gym, and so there's another aspect to that question of, I need to change something in myself. I need to be better at something, or work, like eliminate something. And we always make it product oriented, so like, I need to do something about my, belly, well, I'll go to the gym, get a gym membership. And so you go to the gym, and it's like you could vacuum the house. You can go down and get the laundry and come back up again and realize you forgot the sheets, and you run back down, and then you're just like, oh my God, I left something in the dryer. Or if you're going to go to the gym, going to group exercise, like women my age at one of the gyms, it's like they go to the water aerobics, and it's just nonstop, gossip about this and that and the other thing, because you're doing it together with other people. The third or fifth or second thing I want to say is that we forget that we spend our lives indoors. And we are not designed to live in boxes. We're designed to be outdoors, and walking out the door, even if it's raining, and breathing fresh air and noticing the cycles of the moon and seeing the stars, and even feeling the rain on your face, or bundling up and, putting on your boots and walking through the snow. All of it gives the human body the message that you're alive, and that the body needs to sort of rise to the occasion of walking on uneven ground even. So it's so enlivening, and we spend so much time indoors.
Great advice. Let's bring it home and go to the final segment.
Retirement often brings a hidden challenge, the sudden loss of the built-in community that work once provided. Left unaddressed, this disconnection can lead to loneliness, which research shows is as harmful as smoking or obesity. The solution is to consciously curate your community, treating relationships like a diversified social portfolio. Your inner circle provides emotional support. Hobby groups deliver shared joy and routine engagement. Weak ties, the familiar faces at a cafe or park, create belonging and rootedness. And intergenerational connections offer both wisdom and fresh perspective. Studies show strong social networks boost longevity, slow cognitive decline, and provide resilience against life's inevitable stresses. By intentionally cultivating a mix of deep, casual, and cross-generational ties, you transform retirement from a risk of isolation into a time defined by connection, meaning, and joy.
As we talked about mindfulness in the previous segment, I couldn't help but think, is technology helping us to be more mindful and present, or do we really need to shut technology off temporarily so that we make space for that? Vicki, I want to ask you, you're big on localism. How does that play a role in, building community and combating retirement isolation?
Golly, I just was so fascinated with that little film you did. I thought, well, that handled it. Yeah, well, localism for me is, yes, it's about community, belonging. These are super important to me. I came from quite a fragmented family. My parents both died early, and I just noticed that this sense of belonging is super important to me. So village life gives me a lot of sense of security, joy, meaning, connection. It's also the security. I'm coming back to the social. It's the security of self-provisioning, and I don't just mean my garden. I mean that I live on an island with a bridge in the north, a 2-lane bridge in an earthquake zone, and a ferry to the south. And it can seem like we're invulnerable here because, the trucks are always coming on, the grocery stores, the shelves are always full. But for me, there's a vitality to the realization that those supply chains might get disrupted. And how can we produce what we need here? Produce the fun and joy, produce the relationships, produce the food, produce energy even, with all the solar. So localism is not just about me being happy where I live, which I am, but it's also me being in meaningful relationship with other people to create well-being in my community.
Jordan, what lessons from hospice reveal the essential role of community in someone's final chapter?
I mean, I think community is everything. I mean, that's what you see on people's deathbeds, right? They talk about their family, they talk about their loved ones, they talk about their dog, right? These are the important things. Again, much more than money and even more than accomplishments, right? I do think we want to be the best version of ourselves. And a piece of that is the things we do, whether we succeed or fail. But another piece of that is who we surrounded ourselves with. As I was listening to Vicki speak, what's exciting to me is I've been lucky enough to know Vicki for a number of years and to know her from Your Money, Your Life, reading her book and knowing kind of the financial side, to also knowing her concerns and her advocacy for the resources on this human planet, but also to hear her talk about things like well-being and the natural resources around her. And what's exciting about that is when you see someone intentional doing something that lights them up, they tend to end up surrounded by other people, right? Vicki is surrounded by financial people. She's surrounded by environmental people, and she's surrounded by her local community because they connect to these things that are deeply important to her. And so, again, you hear me banging the drum over and over again. It's, be a good version of yourself and intentional and kind of get involved in things that excite you. And if you do that, I think as opposed to trying to build community, you're going to naturally build much more enduring community. And I think that's something that I definitely see in the dying is certainly the people more at peace when they die are the ones who are surrounded by family and friends and more importantly, surrounded by memories of those people that were important to them.
Ellen, what cognitive benefits arise from surrounding oneself with a diverse mix of relationships?
Well, it depends on the quality of the relationship. So surrounding yourself with people who don't respect you, who you don't like, is probably going to be awful for you. But I think that what I had said before, that once we recognize that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it, we become non-judgmental. So we welcome people, are able to embrace people more frequently. Once we recognize that that's also true for ourselves, like ourselves more. And then in a going forward way, we have a lot of research that the more mindful you are, the more authentic, trustworthy, and charismatic other people think you are. And so you're drawing people to you, you're in a position where you can actually enjoy them. You're less likely to be competitive. I think as we get older, we're less competitive anyway. We've either won the races or we haven't and come to terms. What was the question?
That was a good answer, whatever the question.
Okay. Vicki, I wanted to give him a chance to change the question to match the answer.
Ellen, do you think when it comes to mindful awareness, do we have to shut the technology off, or can we use technology to help us?
No, I think that people misunderstand that no matter what you're doing, you can do it mindfully or mindlessly. You can watch television mindlessly or mindfully. You can eat lunch. You can even garden, as Vicki is suggesting. She can either be there and actually notice the things around her, or she can be on automatic pilot. So technology has the capacity to make us more creative, but it can be used quite mindlessly. And I think, it was interesting. I was in South Africa and I was on this news show. I'm not sure why. And the newscaster said, "Before we start, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "What do you think about kids being on their phones during dinner or whatever?" And I said, "I'll tell you, but you're not going to like the answer." And my view was that, and still is, that everybody would prefer, as your two guests have said over and over again, a warm, nurturing human interaction. And so if your children are choosing to be on the phone rather than to be with you, let's say at mealtime, I think the answer is not to tell them they must get off the phone, but rather to up your game and to make it more interesting and appealing. And that's a use with all technology. If you frighten a person, they're not going to deviate from the plan. And so they're going to, whether it's with technology or without it. So you have to make people feel safe, allow them to feel safe, and to explore. And so that's what both Jordan and Vicki were saying earlier as well, that, you get older, start to paint, to start to garden, do whatever it is you're doing, but don't expect when you start to be fully expert at it, and to allow yourself to discover what you're doing. And you can do this by watching a video or having chat, some AI program tell you exactly how to do it. And you can do the most creative things mindlessly. Or you can even do perhaps the most mindless things creatively. If you realize that the roadmap that you're following was just given to you by other people, even if it's by the machine, even if by technology, that technology was programmed by people. And people have different views, different biases, change their minds, and so on. And so when you put people back in the equation behind all of this, it should free you to, in some way, do it your own way. And to bring it full circle, as you get older, if you've learned nothing else, it's, and as I said before, that so many of the people around you are younger people. It's finally the time to explore and do it your own way. Find your own way.
Well, I think we will end it there. In the case of this episode, we've certainly used technology to have a mindful discussion and full of human connection. I think that this has been an incredible conversation. One of my favorite takeaways from today is this idea that retirement isn't something you step into. It can be something that you design. So whether it's rethinking your relationship with money, tuning into what gives your days meaning, or staying mindful about how you spend your energy, the message from our guests was clear. A fulfilling retirement starts long before you stop working. It starts with awareness, intention, and small experiments that will help you build a life that you actually want to live. So here's an assignment for you, Inspired Moneymaker, this week. Create your own portfolio of passions. Take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and write down 3 activities that give you energy, 3 that give you connection, and 3 that spark curiosity. Put that list somewhere where you will see it, and then commit to trying just one of those things in the next 7 days. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what going into your portfolio of passions, what the outcome was. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Find me by searching for Advisor Andy. Inspired Money is brought to life by me, Bradley John Eaglefeather. Bradley is the wizard behind the scenes, running the live stream, shaping the edits, especially those AI-generated videos at the end of segments, and he keeps everything running smoothly. Our visuals and animations, that's Chad Lawrence, making the episode look as good as it sounds. And of course, a huge thank you to our amazing guests today, Their insights, generosity, and expertise made this episode possible. Be sure to follow their work and keep learning from them. Vicki Robin, you can find her at yourmoneyyourlife.com. Check out her books, Your Money or Your Life, Blessing the Hands That Feed Us, and her podcast, What Could Possibly Go Right? And then she's also blogging at Coming of Aging at Substack. Jordan Grumet, you can find him at earnandinvest.com, host of the Earn and Invest podcast. And Ellen Langer at ellenlanger.com, author of The Mindful Body and many other great books. Be sure to explore their work. It's packed with insights that will help you live more intentionally and mindfully. Do our guests have anything that you want to plug or share before we part ways?
No, I would update that. The website you send somebody to some other universe. If you want to find me, aside from some of the projects I've done, is go to vickyrobin.com.
Perfect. vickyrobin.com. Jordan or Ellen?
Thank you for having me.
Too much information and choose from there.
Just thank you for having me with such wise voices. I appreciate it.
Well said. I really enjoyed all the conversation, all the answers, and have lots to think about going forward. We have some great shows coming up. Inspired Money returns next week on Wednesday. Oh my gosh, I have October in my notes. Don't go by that. I think it's December 17th. We're going to be back with a best of 2025, a reflection on all the episodes that have taken place over the course of this year, and look forward to also the remaining, I think, 5 episodes in 2026. That's in the total body of work of 100 episodes of these live streams. I can't believe that this is episode 95. We've got 5 more. Look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you to all our guests. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everyone.